Welcome to the latest episode of Season 4 of the Digital Adoption Show, your go to podcast for cutting edge insights and innovative strategies in today's dynamic work environment. I am your host, Pavitra R., an information developer at Woodfix. Today, we are very thrilled to speak about how we can bridge the gap in digital adoption. We have a very exceptional guest today, Joe Hill Wilson. Joe is the Chief Commercial Officer, Lead Solutions Architect, and one of the founding members of LearnAmp. With 18 years of experience helping global organizations scale, Joe specializes in people, operations, and organizational development. As a former head of L&D for a global service business, Joe has extensive experience in building L&D departments and cultures from the ground up. Joe's journey into L&D actually began from a career in acting, where he found his passion for helping and coaching people improve their communication and presentation skills. He built an L&D team department from the ground up at a mid-sized firm, starting just from a team of 70 people to an international organization with over 900 employees. Joe's expertise lies in linking employee and customer experiences, and he sees synergies across organizational identity, culture, talent development, systems, processes, and service design. Welcome to our podcast, Joe.
Thank you so much. What an introduction. Always interesting hearing your kind of career being played back to you. But yeah, thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here.
Yeah. Before we start into the serious discussions, right, we would like to get to know you a little better. So we have a
Brilliant, let's
small
do it.
segment called the Digital Pulse. So I want to ask you, what is that one passion or activity that you are super fond of outside of work?
Yeah, good question. I do some mentoring. So I work with kind of some younger people that are coming into the workplace, helping them to get clear on kind of what their passions are and how that might align to kind of future careers. There's one in particular I work with called the Amos Bursary. So it's people of kind of African and Caribbean descent, helping them to excel through that kind of education phase and really finding themselves in the workplace. So I recently actually did a hike, creating some money and kind of creating awareness. It's called the Three Peaks in the UK. So it's the three highest kind of mountains that we have in the UK. So it was a nice alignment between a cause that I feel passionate about, but also getting out into nature and staying fit and adventuring. So yeah, those are some of the things that I love to do.
That sounds really fun. You're getting to teach people and actually follow something that you like as well. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's so much you can learn from, kind of newer generations hitting the workplace well. So I find it really super interesting and it's a great thing to spend.
Yeah. So we have three rapid fire questions. It's actually called triple strike. So your first
Okay.
question, it's going to be a very fun question. So if you could star as a lead in one famous movie, which movie would you choose and why?
Interesting. So I've always been a bit of a fan of kind of Harrison Ford, some of the movies he's in. So Blade Runner, Star Wars, Indiana Jones. I think he's always kind of plays these interesting kind of, they're not anti-heroes, kind of almost unconventional heroes, let's say. They always do the right thing, but they never do it quite in the way that people expect them to. So I've always liked his movies, or maybe Neo from The Matrix, because who doesn't want to be able to manipulate the Matrix up and be able to fly? So there's probably some of the ones that I quite enjoy playing.
Yeah, it's almost like your career trajectory, right? From acting and for you to dive into something new. Imagine if you could be like Indiana Jones. That would be so much fun.
Right, exactly. I'm not sure if I'm the Indiana Jones of the L&D space, but I try and keep the things as adventurous as possible. That's for sure.
That's a good nickname, Indiana Jones of the Alien. Yeah, that sounds really fun. So my second question is, if you could time travel and go back to one historical figure and teach them one modern skill, which historical figure would you choose and what would you teach them?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a strange choice, this, but I think Gandhi learning about how to use social media. And the reason I think this is that Gandhi was such an amazing communicator, such a positive influence in the world, but he didn't have the reach that he could have these days if he was on, let's say, some of the social media channels. So I think we need some positive, really good, influential thought leaders in the space at the moment. And I can imagine that it would have helped him to grow his reach, be able to mobilize support and awareness. So I'm going to go for Gandhi on Facebook. I think that would have been a very positive thing for the world.
Yeah, that would have been the next social revolution for sure. The third question, if animals could talk, what is one burning question you would ask them?
Oh, probably what they think about us. Like, what's the things that human could probably start, stop, or continue. What are the things that they think we could do to kind of make this a better place for both humans and animals? I'm sure they'd had some very good advice for us, some very sage advice.
Yeah, I know. So those are the fun questions. Let's go into the serious topic now. So my first question to you is, we are going to be discussing a lot about digital adoption and L&Ds. So my first question goes to digital adoption. So when it comes to digital adoption, there often lies a gap. So from your experience, what are some key differences of how customers and vendors perceive digital adoption? And what do you think are the key factors that makes or breaks this relationship?
Yeah, interesting. I think there definitely are differences. I think there's also lots of synergies as well. I think from a customer perspective, the things they care about are, is it easy to use? Is it enjoyable? Is it delivering value for our different stakeholders, our end users, our senior stakeholders? How much support do we get? How reliable is it? And and I think from a vendor perspective, we care about engagement and utilization. I think we care about obviously kind of sales and revenue generation, but also massively in terms of kind of user NPS, in terms of feedback, in terms of making sure that we're driving advocacy, and that we're able to kind of show how solutions that we create are differentiated in how they provide value for customers as well. So I think there's a lot of synergy and alignment around what does that value look like and how can you demonstrate that back to the organization as well. So I think the things that work really well in vendor and customer relationship center around being really aligned around expectations. What roles are you both playing? Making sure that you are actually giving time to each other, because vendors really need to understand organizations, what's going on inside the organization, what problems are they having a really kind of continuous, updated sense of, so that they can actually provide the best consultative support and develop their product to keep on meeting the needs of those customers as well. And I think there needs to be openness and transparency. It's really, we see feedback, for instance, as being a real gift. So we want to hear all of the maybe more negative or kind of constructive elements as well. I know our chief product officer always says in product that there's a kind of a saying, which is, I'm happy for you to tell me that my baby's ugly, which is you kind of want to know the things that aren't working quite so well so that you can actually act on those as well. So I think having that open, transparent relationship can really, really help. And then also being very specific around what you're working on, having measurable outcomes that both parties understand and can be working toward. I think the more specific the goals and the use cases, the more value that people get from adopting the platforms.
That's such an insightful saying. Talking about feedback, my next question is related to that. So, how can organizations adopt a customer centric design approach to ensure that the digital solutions meet real world needs? And what role do you think that customer feedback plays in this?
Huge. I mean, customer feedback should be at the absolute center of your product methodology and all of your processes. So I think it's been one of the things that LearnAmp we've been really good at over the years. So I think when you're looking at creating a business in the first place, you need to understand, well, who first are you designing product for? So like, what does that ideal customer profile look like? How well do you know them? Do you really get under the skin of like what's going on in their world? What problems are they facing? How can you create value for them? Then I think it's about engaging with those people. It's about trying to see if you can do interviews and workshops where you actually speak to them about, in a lot of detail, the things that are going on in their work lives, and then looking at creating solutions. I think staying agile in a product development perspective is super important, not being waterfall, not having too much of a kind of fixed mindset around what your product needs to be, and actually being able to iterate based on feedback that you get from your customers. And over time, I think that changes a little bit. I think you get more clear as you have more experience about what your product needs to look like and where it delivers value. But I think in the early stages, lots of MVPing, lots of minimal viable products, testing, iterating, I think is hugely important. And then I think it's really important that all the way through production, get your customers involved in alpha testing, beta testing, user acceptance testing. So at each stage, they're being able to give you that really kind of critical feedback so that you're developing and refining things actually have a real value for them. And then I think the last thing is, have you got very good metrics, kind of customer metrics, which will allow you to understand, are you achieving the things that you set out to achieve? And are you going back continually to measure against those kind of North Star metrics? And if you're not, just keep on going. Don't try and focus on other parts of the product. Keep on going until you're delivering that core value. Because once you've got the core value that people are driving the platform, then you can start to work on other aspects. So I think too often people just try and build too much rather than focusing on the things that drive the most value to people.
Understood. Diverting from the questions a little bit, how do you
It's,
think organizations should handle negative feedback?
I think you've got to be open to it. I think, as I said, it's really, it's a gift. I think as long as I think with all feedback, I worked for a long time as well in the kind of customer experience space. When you're receiving feedback, it's not personal to you, it's someone's perception. And you have to take that in the context feedback that you get from lots of people. So some people, you can't keep everyone happy. Some people are going to be negative. Some people aren't quite appreciate your platform the way that others do. So understanding where the majority of the people that you want to focus on and how they feel is important. But with the negative feedback, I think it's about really understanding where that comes from and understanding what problem ultimately people are trying to solve. Because there's lots of creative ways that you can solve a problem. It doesn't have to be, customers will often give you ideas about how to improve your product in a very specific way. But we often say, no, let's understand what you're trying to achieve. And then together we can find solutions. And sometimes they can be quite flexible. I think, again, in LearnAmp, we've done a very good job to have tools that can be flexed in lots of different use cases. And we've tried to do that so that they can be personalized to each individual customer. So yeah, try not to be too specific, understand what the root cause is of what they're trying to do, and then develop a product that meets that need, I think.
Yeah, that's pretty good advice. So we're going into L&D right now. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about L&D. So what do you think are some common misconceptions that top performing vendors have about L&D training and creating the right LMS? And how do you think these misconceptions can be addressed?
I think in the L&D space, I think there's a lot of people that haven't worked in L&D. So I think they're building technology that they think that people want or solutions that they think they want. I think sometimes they're too far removed from the actual customers and what's going on in their lives. I think it's a lot of us have got backgrounds in the L&D space, LearnAmp, and I think that helps us to stay focused on solving problems that we used to have. And I think the more that you can be involved in roundtables, you can actually go and meet customers. You can be involved in community groups where L&D practitioners are talking about their problems. I think the closer you get to what really drives value for them. So as an example, skills in our space in AI are quite, a lot of people talk about the value of having them in the solutions, but actually a lot of businesses aren't mature enough yet to apply a kind of skill-based approach. Or in AI, even though lots of people are talking about it, actually lots of businesses don't feel that they're yet at a place which, well, they'll benefit most from some of the applications of AI, or their businesses don't even allow them to be able to use AI from a kind of security and a legal perspective as well. So I think staying very focused and trying to sometimes block out all of the shiny things that can apply in our space to focus on the things that drive most engagement are really important. But some of the things I think in our space we see come up a lot, gamification being used as a way to talk about engagement. I think it can be a part of your strategy, but ultimately it can be quite thin and motivators for people. People do like reward, but it's a bit like dopamine hits on your phone. It only lasts for so long. You need to kind of tap into what intrinsically motivates people about their careers and why the learning is actually going to help to impact their lives and help them to develop. So I think that's one big thing. I think I've already said it, but AI being the answer to everything. I actually think, for instance, with AI recommendations, we know that AI has kind of hallucinations and it's only good as the data in which it's pulling those recommendations from. So in software, there's, this concept of mixed initiatives, which is the human has to be involved in also saying, well, where am I at now? And what do I want to learn going forward? It's not just about understanding what I've learned in the past to recommend content to me. So I think there needs to be flexibility that the human, the individual, can also adapt the way that those algorithms work or can influence the way that those algorithms work. And then there are other things like in our space, I think there's always a big push on creating more content, having more content partners. But we don't need more content. Content is not the problem. It's about being able to understand the unique development needs of each person and then surfacing the right kind of offering to them, not having too much because it just essentially it overwhelms people and it creates more noise. And then I think the last thing I'd say is products that do really well are often very good because they are simple, easy to use, and they focus on the core problems or the core solutions that they need. More functionality doesn't equal kind of more sophistication. And I think it can create a lot of complexity sometimes with products as well. It's fine to have a broad product, but you need to then be able to tailor that to be able to turn things off and be able to make sure that you're really just delivering the value that the customer needs. Otherwise, systems can overwhelm a lot of people, I think.
Makes sense. You spoke about having the right solution at the right level of maturity. Could you please touch upon that?
Yeah, again, I think it's really about getting the skin of your customers and understanding where they are. If you try to move a customer and a set of users too far ahead, they're just going to resist it because they're not comfortable in that space. And each customer, each culture has a certain level of kind of digital literacy or a certain amount of maturity, I think, around the offering. So, what we often look to do when we're replacing systems, for instance, is we'll understand, well, what is currently being deployed and then how do we almost kind of match that, but improve it from the perspective of the user experience and adding or improving the kind of the UX, the flows that people are engaging with, improving efficiencies for admins, but not kind of introducing too many things too quickly. Because otherwise, I think again, it can just overwhelm people. So we always have this process in kind of implementing customers, which is to understand how to match and better what they've currently got. And then what's the kind of strategy about deploying solutions over a period of time. And a bit like what I was just saying around the feature sets, we've got quite a broad offering that everything we can toggle on or off. So we can start very simply with customers, knowing where they're at today and what they need. But we know that we can future proof their needs and turn things on when they need as later down the line. And I think a big part of that is having regular conversations, success reviews, really understanding where the customers are at, what's driving value, what's changing in their organization, and then what else within your functionality set potentially provide more value going forward as well.
Understood. You spoke about gamification and how it won't draw people's attention for too long. So my next question is something related to that. So can you share some strategies or features that LMS vendors should focus on to improve user engagement and learning retention in today's learning environment?
Definitely. So I almost think the opposite of what I was saying around with gamification is tapping into these individual motivators for individuals. So a core part of our proposition at LearnAmp is to tie learning to talent development and also to career goals. So if individuals can understand how the learning that they're doing is helping them to improve the skills, and if they can improve their skills and competencies, that helps them perform better in their roles. That then leads to them having more recognition, more progression opportunities, and ultimately to be able to deliver against their own personal goals. And by completing that kind of loop, whereby you can really see the impact of learning in your roles and on your career, you're much more likely to drive motivation with the actual individual learners. But also, you're able to prove to the organization that learning is having a tangible impact. I think there's lots of organizations where they talk a lot about engagement levels and amount of content being consumed. That's not what CFOs and senior management teams care about. They want to see that, are people improving? Are we building the capabilities the organization need? Are people performing better as a result? And then I think you have more overall engagement in L&D as a function and the value it can bring to the organization. So I think that's one part. Another part for us is for L&D can't just sit centrally in the organization and be pushed out because L&D can't know everything. And also, crucially, to get engagement, you need to have managers and coaches in the teams and in the departments really involved in matching the L&D offering to the needs of the individuals that they have in their team. So I think decentralizing ownership we talk about by getting subject matter experts involved in creating content, having team managers have their own reporting dashboard so they can really understand what's working or not working for their team, really kind of having the products and the L&D strategy live within the business, I think is a really important aspect of driving that engagement as well. And then I think in terms of what you were saying around learning retention, a really critical thing is not just learning doesn't happen for learning's sake. You've got to put that learning into practice. So we have lots of assessments and activities, for instance, like people can do after a piece of learning, a self-record video that they can then send over to a manager or a mentor who can then review that. If it's, let's say, a pitch for a sales person, or if it's, let's say, a kind of a proposal from a leadership perspective, and they can actually have that sent over and they can receive coaching around that particular activity that they've just done. So they can actually take the learning, apply it in a practical sense in their roles, and then get feedback. And again, learning needs to be iterative and it needs to be put into practice, and you need to see how learning is having an impact on your role in order for people to really engage in the learning process and to get the most from it as well.
Yeah, with your answers, I can see that you can make learning very fun.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Fun is going to be cool for sure.
Many companies struggle with the real world implementation of digital solutions that they purchase. So, what do you think are some of the common pitfalls that you have observed, and how do you think they can avoid those pitfalls?
Good question. I think from things that we've seen over the years, we often talk about implementations being like a sprint. You need to be really ready for them because the more that you can make space and time, and you can try and get to a point of value for the organization as quickly as possible once they purchase the solution, the more that people are going to get value and are going to be engaged in the product. So preparation is really important. So in our space, for instance, doing things like content audits, knowing whether the content that you've already got in the system is going to be fit for purpose or whether you need to upgrade that or purchase some content or create some new content. So we actually have a kind of readiness period we have prior to implementation that we actually give people through the sales process so they can really think about what are all the things that they need to do in order to be as successful as possible during that kind of implementation sprint. So some things, for instance, are like, do they have a really clear communication strategy? Are they creating enough awareness and excitement about what's coming so that when they get to launch, people are ready for it, they're prepared for it, and looking forward to what's coming? And we see other things whereby we work with people around engagement strategies that they're not just focusing about the day, the launch itself, because there's a real thing in products, which is around the trough of disillusionment. I don't know if you guys have kind of ever talked about this, but there's a lot of energy that goes into people launching solutions. And if you don't have a plan for what you do after launch and in the months after, often the energy can kind of flow away. And you need to have a really kind of clear plan about the other things that you're going to be introduced. Do you have a sustainable kind of set of campaigns around learning initiatives, or what other things are you going to release in the platform so people still stay engaged and excited about what's coming next? So I think it's really about understanding where your where are your employees or audience today? What's the journey that you want to take them on? And then how prepared and ready for you are you around creating that kind of communication and engagement plan with them as well? And yeah, don't launch with everything. Keep some things back so that you can launch them later.
Makes sense. My last question to you is providing context that motivates learners to engage with digital platforms is very crucial. How do you think organizations can effectively create and communicate their context to their learners?
Yes. I having been in L&D myself prior to LearnAmp, we always talk about the idea of a WIFI, which is what's in it for you. And I think if you really understand the motivations, how does a product or a solution actually improve and make lives easier for the learners, for the managers, for the administrators, really working on those different stakeholder groups and understanding what's going to work best for them, and then being able to communicate to them in a very practical way how a solution is going to be able to benefit their lives. I think that can make a big difference. I think managers and coaches, again, can play a really critical role in kind of translating almost, for instance, in the L&D space, they understand their employees better than anybody else and their development needs. So then being able to match what their needs are and mapping that back to the solutions that are being provided to provide that kind of context clue is really important. And they're the ones that kind of sit between the middle of L&D and learners being really well matched in terms of how they're providing value. And then I think in terms of actual tools, we've kind of been saying for quite a few years that L&D almost need to think of themselves like product owners. And if you're taking a product to market, you need to have really good marketing tools that allow you to be able to communicate out and let people know what's available in the offering on a regular basis. And again, how that can benefit their lives or the things that they're focused from a development perspective. So in app, in LearnAmp, we have like featured videos, we have featured channels, we have kind of push notifications, we have shares, we have personalized recommendations around content. I think all of these things play a really critical role in being able to drive the kind of engagement in the solution because people are aware of what's available and why it's important to them.
Understood. So that was a very fun conversation, Joe. We had a great time. So before we go to our listeners, please tune in to the Digital Adoption Show across platforms to listen to more such interesting, fun, and intriguing conversations with some of the top minds in the digital space. We are actually available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and YouTube. Whether you're at home or on the go, don't miss out on our latest episodes. Thank you so much, Joe, for being a part of this episode. It was a very fun episode and we learned a lot. I'm your host, Pavitra R, signing off.